So will we ever be able to buy a house in Hawaii? I think about this question a lot, probably more than I should, but as a husband and a father of a young family, it's something that I, like many other locals, think about. And I recently came across an article in Civil Beat that talked about the difficulties of buying a home in Hawaii through 5 charts. And I wanted to go over the charts because I thought it painted a pretty grim picture for Hawaii's current and potentially future housing situation. And by the end of this video, I hope that you get a better understanding about the real challenges of life in Hawaii, which includes buying a house here. Because sometimes we buy into this catch-all reasoning that Hawaii is just expensive, and then we mindlessly continue to pay for the price of paradise without actually looking at how expensive things really are. So let's take a look at some of these numbers together and actually see what our situation is like in Hawaii. And maybe there's some hope here. So the first chart is over 1 million needed to buy a single family home at median price. First of all, I think it's crazy to imagine that the first benchmark on this chart starts at $800,000 and that the median price for a single family home is over $1 million. Because I remember when I first started looking at housing prices and I saw the number creeping up slowly, and I figured it's just a matter of time before it hit $1 million, but I never thought it'd happen this quickly. Based on this graph, it's like housing prices took off in the summer of 2020. When Hawaii was in the middle of lockdowns and restrictions, people were losing their jobs and being forced to stay at home, and all of a sudden, housing prices shot up like crazy. In a matter of 4 months, the median price rose by $100,000. 6 months later, it rose another $70,000. And within a year, the median price rose by about $200,000. And again, this was during one of the most craziest economic years that the state's ever had. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the conversation about housing, is that we had this huge setback this past couple of years. While locals were scrambling for federal assistance and unemployment, housing prices managed to increase by 27% in 1 year. And this article poses the question, how long can prices climb before Hawaii's already declining population dwindles even more? And that's a really good question. I don't know, but let's just say that I don't see the prices climbing down anytime soon. And the second chart is how many hours do I need to work to afford a single family home? And this is an interesting interactive chart. Based on a monthly mortgage of $3,819 for a single family home on Oahu and an interest rate of 4% for a 30-year mortgage, you can slide the wage slider to see how many hours you need to work per day to be able to afford that. And it's kind of fun, so I want to see what it would take to be able to do that. And according to the chart, for someone earning $10 an hour, they'd have to work 17 hours per day using 100% of their paycheck, which is impossible. Or they'd have to work 55 hours a day using just 30% of their paycheck. For someone earning $18 an hour, which is what they're proposing for the minimum wage increase, they'd have to work 9 hours a day using 100% of their paycheck, or work 31 hours a day using 30% of their paycheck. For someone earning $66 an hour, they'd have to work 3 hours per day using 100% of their paycheck, or that standard 8-hour day using 30% of their paycheck. And $66 an hour comes out to $137,280 per year. And while some of these hourly results are ridiculous in that they would break the space-time continuum, it's good to see how much people have to work to live here. And also, it shows that if you can get a job that earns over $140,000, or you have 2 or more people earning more than $140,000 annually, it can actually be affordable, assuming you have enough for the down payment. The third chart is paying rent is not much easier. What I like about this chart is it's very easy to understand. It's a great breakdown of the size of the housing unit, the fair market rent, the annual income needed, and the hourly wage needed. And whenever they talk about housing or average median income and things like that, I wish they would break it down by the real numbers like this instead of by percentages, because to your average person, that doesn't really mean anything. In 2021, the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom rental was $2,240, and I'd say that's pretty accurate, of course, depending on what part of the state that you want to live. With nearly 40% of locals renting, you can see why it's tough to save enough for a down payment to buy a home if you're paying that much to rent. Even if you could afford the monthly mortgage payments, where are you going to get the 10 to 20% to put down when it comes time to buy the home? Because I don't know too many people who can save that much if you're paying this amount of rent. And the fourth chart, Hawaii homes are more crowded than the mainland. This is my favorite chart because it shows social behavior and what people, mostly locals, have to do to survive in Hawaii. Multi-generational housing, or gotta go live with mom and dad. 26% of Hawaii households are multi-generational, which is defined as 3 or more generations. So that means a lot of people are living with grandma, grandpa, which helps with childcare, but that's gotta be tough sometimes when everyone is so crowded in the same space. And when you think about what 26% means in Hawaii, that's 1 out of 4 households. And this doesn't even include the people like me when I used to live with my parents before getting married and having a son. So I still remember when I used to live with my parents when I moved back to Hawaii. I slept in the same bed that I used to sleep in growing up. And there were times when I felt like I was in high school again because my room looked exactly the same. But within 2 years of living at home, I was able to buy a place on my own. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without having a place to live for free. I mean, it took a lot of discipline. You know, I didn't buy a lot of things or eat out a lot. I ate the same thing for lunch for like 2 years, you know, sandwiches, but it was worth it. Although some people may look down on multi-generational housing, I look at it more like locals' home court advantage. It's one of the things that if you have family here, you can take advantage of that and save a lot of money. And the last chart is buying options become scarce. This chart shows the inventory of single-family homes and condos at the end of each month from 2019 to 2021. But basically the chart shows that there is less inventory in the market since 2019. Single-family homes went from about 1,000 in January 2019 to 309 in December of 2021. And condos went from 1,179 in January 2019 to 946 in December of 2021. The article notes 3 major factors to this drop in inventory: lack of development, historically low interest rates, and high demand from local buyers, 75% of the total, as well as mainland and international buyers. Now, I know a lot of blame gets placed on mainland and international buyers, but my question is, what does local buyer mean? Because I'd like to know how they determine that, because if an international buyer is someone who lives outside of the country and they buy a home in Hawaii, I got it. If a mainland buyer is someone who lives on the continental US or the mainland and they buy a home in Hawaii, I totally get that. But does local buyer mean someone who just lives in Hawaii and buys a home in Hawaii? Because under that definition, that could be someone who moves here from the mainland and rents for like 6 months and then buys a home in Hawaii. I mean, technically, they aren't a mainland buyer anymore. But to use the term local, especially in the way that we use the term local in Hawaii, may be a little misleading. I think what would be more interesting and relevant to know is how many buyers are from Hawaii or grew up here. Because again, when people use the term local buyer in Hawaii, that carries a different connotation because we use local to mean someone from Hawaii. I really believe that housing is Hawaii's biggest problem right now. I know that we have so many other problems going on, but those all won't matter for very long if people are forced to leave. One of the worst things to come out of the housing situation in Hawaii is that I think it creates conflict within the family. That adult children are waiting in anticipation for their parents to die so they get the house, or they can sell it and just take their share of the money. That 3 or 4 generations are forced to live together, not because they want to, but because they have to. And that puts extra financial strain on probably already shaky relationships. That even if we were able to somehow buy a home in Hawaii, I can't imagine my son being able to afford to live in Hawaii when he's an adult. But the thing is, despite all of these charts that say that I can't buy a home, I'm still hopeful. We save and we do our best to live on a budget. And that means that we can't buy a new SUV every other year or eat out at the newest trendy restaurant. Maybe it means not going to Vegas or not having the newest iPhone every single year. But we're trying. And really that's all we and many local families can do. So please let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching and aloha.
Hello.